Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today's podcast is sponsored by PM Powered. I am Wanda Curlee, your authority on all things project, program, and portfolio management. I'd like to remind you that on April 19th, PM Powered will offer a live webinar titled The Baby Steps of Portfolio Management. Go to pmpowered.com and sign up for the 30-minute webinar. The baby steps of portfolio management will provide you information on why project portfolio is the newest area of project management. Learn why project management is now in strategy. Can you believe it? We are now in the strategic areas. And learn the basics of speaking to executive leadership and writing a business case. So without further ado, let's get going on what's going on in the world of project management. So the first article I have for you today is by Intelligent Machines, and it's called Here's How the U.S. Needs to Prepare for the Age of Artificial Intelligence. But before we go there, here in the United States, Mark Zuckerberg was talking to our Senate, and he revealed that AI artificial intelligence was going to be the means by the way they were going to look at hatred on Facebook. That's got a double-edged sword because my hatred might be something that somebody else believes. So it'll be very interesting on seeing how they use AI to weed out hatred. Like I said, that's a double-edged sword. I would have thought they would have started AI someplace else, but you got to start somewhere. So AI and hatred and Facebook. So stay tuned to see how that goes. So going back to the article on Here's How the U.S. Needs to Prepare for Age of Artificial Intelligence, most big countries, Russia, China, and France, and others, have a policy on AI. And the United States decided to abandon that and kind of just let AI do what it needs to do. But I don't know if that's really good or bad. But there are certain things that need to happen in a country for AI really to take off. First, we have to invest more. There has to be funding in AI research, and that needs to be a big priority. Companies are already doing that, but the government needs to get involved too to provide seed money to enhance the idea of entrepreneurs looking at what AI can do. So the next thing is prepare for job losses. I've mentioned that before. When a new technology comes aboard, there's going to be job losses, but the creation of new jobs. So we have to stay current with where technology is going. If you don't, you will be lost. Nurture talent. I'm always saying that. If you've got good talent, nurture it and keep that talent. Keep them informed. Keep that talent up to date on technology so that they can stay current with technology and stay in a job. You want to nurture the great talent that you have. Prioritize education. We have to make sure that AI is being taught in universities, maybe even at the high school level or gymnasium level in Europe. But AI needs to be taught and needs to be part of the curriculum. I dare to say that most teachers are not up to date on AI, but they need to. We need to have AI within the classrooms. We see it slowly coming into universities, but I dare to say that it needs to come in faster. Guide regulation. Yes, there's got to be regulation. If we let AI go amok, we're going to have another problem. Will we have another Facebook? Maybe, but I think AI will see it differently. Do we really want AI in our personal data? Well, and it's coming, folks. It really is coming. Understand the technology. AI is a big area, and I don't know that we understand what AI can really do. I don't know that anybody does. We understand it for our technology, so a big company such as HP, Oracle, all of those are using AI and are pushing AI. But do you really understand how it affects you? You've got to understand that. And people have got to understand how to use it, how to use this technology and understand the pros and the cons, and also the ethical dilemmas that AI brings. That would be a future topic that we'll talk about, ethics and AI. That should be interesting because you as a project manager need to understand that, because you will be affected by ethics if you're doing an AI technology build or an AI technology incorporation into a company. So stay tuned on what AI is going to do. So many of you, I'm sure, saw the Ready Player One. I have not seen it yet, but how far is the gap between those? The gap is there. It's going to take a while before we do Ready Player One type of virtual technology. But I'm here to say we've seen the gloves that allow people to move into the area of AI. But Elon Musk is actually building a suit so that you have the feeling of what's going on in the AI world throughout your body. There's also been some applications for the military area for using this suit as well. So while Ready Player One was a great way to visualize AI, it is coming, but it's probably 10 to 15 years before we do that. So stay tuned. And you project managers will be helping with that. So how will merging minds and machines change our conscious experience? Very interesting. So we are merging minds and machines, which is kind of scary. There is some technology going on where we're merging our minds with AI. Can you imagine that? There's also technology that are merging two consciousnesses together. Consciousness, that's a mouthful there. So project managers, again, this is an ethical dilemma that you may have. Do we really want to put our minds linked in with AI? Maybe that's coming. Maybe that's how we control AI within our environment. So stay tuned as to what's going on in that area. So before we go there, let me just change a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So I want to talk about data governance is everyone's business. I found this quite interesting because data is what drives many things. It improves data decision making. It improves operational efficiency. If we know what's going on in our organization, then we know, and we have to do that through data. It improves data understanding and lineage. It's complying with industry regulations. It drives revenue and everything else within our company. So data is the big thing. But did you know that data, we use less than 0.5% of all the data that comes into our organization? And the reason for that is because there is no data governance. Many companies are understanding now that they need to put somebody in charge of the governance of the data so that all data is harnessed and all data comes to you so you can improve your decision making. 29.2% say that data driving decision making is their most important thing. So that's 29.2%. And if you're only harnessing 0.5% of the data, can you imagine what would happen if you even harnessed 50% of the data? Now, I do understand that not all the data will be relevant to decision making, but can you imagine how much you're missing if you're only looking at 0.5% of the data? And much of the data is siloed. So for example, financial data is looked in one silo. That's usually by this CFO and his or her organization. There's data that looks at improving efficiency of machines and robotics and your manufacturing line. That's looked at normally by the CIO. Well, can you imagine if we harness both of those together, what we might see if the CIO and CFO put their data together and there's some governance around it and slices and dice it in different ways? It would be just amazing to me how much data we would see. So stay tuned for seeing if we have chief governance data officers. That would be an interesting title, but I'm sure it's coming. Okay, let's switch actions here. We have construction of California water fix project. This is to harness the data for what's going on in the area of water in Southern California. And if you know anything about that, you know that they are hurting for water in Southern California. So there's a $10.8 billion project that's going to be voted on April 10th. So stay tuned to see if it occurs. So it was already voted upon, and I believe it was passed. And the project itself is $17 billion, and it includes 3 new water intakes and 2 tunnels. So stay tuned for that. There's a transmission line that's going on that is looking to be approved in the Americas Southwest. That is a $2 billion project, and it goes over Arizona and New Mexico. So stay tuned for that. In the past, I've talked about GDPR, and GDPR is the European General Data Protection Regulation. So guess what, folks? It happens next May, and if you haven't done it, you are in trouble. So what are the 10 key businesses that you need to know about GDPR? So here are the 10 facts that you need to be thinking about. GDPR applies to all. It does not just European folks. If you have any information or data that goes through Europe, you are required to do GDPR and think about GDPR. So it's not just for EU citizens, it's for everybody. GDPR widens the definition of personal data. Do you think Europe now has a hard standard for personal data? It's going to get worse, folks. So you need to understand what it is. Project managers, if you're doing any GDPR, you need to understand what now is personal data. And now GDPR is tightening the rules for obtaining valid consent to using personal information. You can't just say, do I consent? You can't ask your users, do you consent to providing personal data? You have to go in with the wherewithals, and you've got to make it understandable. It can't just be yes or no. You've got to make sure that the people understand what they're doing. The fourth one, GDPR makes the appointment of a DPO mandatory for certain organizations. What is a DPO? A DPO is a data protection officer. I would imagine this will be a part of the C-suite in some organizations or executive leadership, because you've got, as I mentioned before, we've got to harness all the data that's going on. And right now, as I mentioned before, most companies only look at 0.5% of the data. They don't understand what data they have. So a DPO would be a good place to start for that governance. The GDPR introduces mandatory PIAs. So this is privacy impact statements. And what the GDPR will require is data controllers to conduct PIAs where privacy breach risks are high to minimize risks. So where they see that a risk for breach is, PIAs must be done. This means that U.S. companies must do that too if they have any data going through Europe. 6, the GDPR introduces a common data breach notification requirement. So if you have a data breach, within 72 hours of discovering it, you must report it. Stay tuned, American companies, because you will have to do this too. Doesn't mean you have to report it in the United States, but you must report it in Europe. And if you report it in Europe, guess what? The world now knows. GDPR introduces the right to be forgotten. So Facebook, stay tuned. If I want to be forgotten on Facebook, you've got to make that happen if you're going through Europe. And we all know that Facebook is in Europe. Facebook, are you ready? Yahoo, are you ready? YouTube, are you ready? So stay tuned, all companies. You've got to be ready for that. Number 8, GDPR expands liability beyond data controllers. So the GDPR also covers any organization that provides data processing service to the data controller, which means that even organizations that are purely service providers that work with personal data will need to comply. So stay tuned, folks. You've got to understand that. Number 9, the GDPR requires privacy by design. So you have to design privacy into your data and processes. This is not done in many organizations today. And last but not least, the GDPR introduces the concept of a one-stop shop. So in the past, Ireland has been popular because they have permissive data protection, but this is not going to happen anymore. They will have to comply. So all disappears with, however, all that disappears with GDPR, which allows any European data protection authority to take action against an organization regardless of where in the world the company is based. So stay tuned. Even if you are based in the United States, if you have server farms in Europe, you are now having to comply with GDPR. Folks, understand GDPR. If you're an American company, you have to do GDPR. If you're a European country, obviously you still do. And if you're a country in South America and go through Europe, you have to do that. So all countries, if you do anything in Europe, you must comply. So let me switch over here to another. So I'm talking about AI a lot, but what will AI do for project management? I've given my thoughts about what AI will do for project management. It'll help us do things like scheduling and risk management. But what does this article say about it? So it's by Vineyard Vines, and it says 3 ways AI will change project management for the better. But first it defines what is project management AI. So they define it, and I'm going to read it. Project management AI is a system that can perform the day-to-day management and administration of projects without requiring human input. Again, that's what I was saying about scheduling, risk, budgeting. It will not only automate simple tasks, but will develop an understanding of key project performance. Project management AI can then use the understanding to uncover insights, perform more complex tasks, make recommendations, and make decisions, sometimes in ways people just can't do today. Remember, I have said in the past that we have 3 ways of thinking. So if I'm a project manager and I tend to think as a coach, which means that I see the forest for the trees, I see the big picture. But if I'm doing risk management and now this AI knows that I do risk management from the sense that I look at the forest but not the trees, it can now come and tell me, hey, Wanda, have you forgotten about this risk that may do this? Because it's a more tactical risk, but it will affect the portfolio, for example, if I have the portfolio management. Or it might detect a risk that looks at the strategy, but again, I'm not looking at strategy because I'm looking at the big picture. So this AI will now understand how I think and bring in different risks that I may forget about. Or it could look at scheduling and know that I look at the big picture, but I forget to look at the tactical part of scheduling. So AI are going to help project managers be more value add to the organization. So what are the 3 things that AI will do for project management? So let's start this. And it's going to do more than that. It will narrow project assistance. So we'll have new project assistants that will help us. Second generation of AI will expand project understanding. So not only will we have project assistants, but it will understand how project teams work together and what we need to do. And then third generation will fill in the data gaps. So for example, if we have a complex situation and it can go out and harness all the data. Remember, I told you on a previous article that we just talked about that we only harness about 0.5% of the data that's available. AI will be able to go out and look at all the data that is put together through IoT. So what are some of the things that it'll do for us? It will deliver advice, not just the data. It will be able to slice and dice it and see where we need advice to help. It will be exciting times ahead for us in the project management. So I told you about the 3 different generations of AI. So to me, this is exciting news. We will have AI embedded into our project management softwares, all the different ones. So Microsoft, stay tuned. You got to get AI into MS Project Server and MS Project Desktop because we need it. Right now, we cannot harness the data that we need. So all the project management softwares out there, you need to incorporate AI. And if you're not looking at that, believe me, you will be left behind because we as project managers want that capability and we need you to put it in. I want to be able to go to my Google or my Siri and say, hey Siri, do this for me. Hey Siri, what are my risks? What are my top 5 strategic risks? What are my top 5 tactical risks? I want to be able to go and say, hey Siri or hey Google, is there an issue that I need to know about by the 5 strategic risks coupled with my 5 tactical risks? Remember, I've got to be able to put that data together, and right now it's very difficult. We do that manually. So in the latest PM network that came out in April, there was a very interesting article. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Concorde. That was a supersonic commercial jet that flew basically from France to the United States. And it never caught on because there were so many regulations that were interfering with it. And then there was a crash that happened, and that kind of was the demise of Concorde. But I'm here to tell you that governments are working on ways to allow supersonic to go over their countries. And I know in the United States they're looking at it, but there are ways of trying to dampen the supersonic boom. So right now there are 3 companies that are working on that. One is called the Arion, and it's a partnership by Arion, a smaller company, Lockheed Martin, and GE Aviation. So they're coming up with the next generation Concorde. Then there's another one called Spike Aerospace. They're developing the Spike S-512, and it holds up to 22 passengers. The Arion AS2 only holds up to 12. And finally, there's the Boom, which is being done by Boom Technologies, and it holds 45 to 55 passengers. So it'll be interesting to see which technology takes over. And if you're a project manager on any one of these companies working on this, I would love to have you on one of my podcasts, because this would be very interesting to see the latest technologies and what you're using in your technologies, not just from a jet engine or a perspective, but are you using AI? Are you using IoT in your technologies on your new supersonic aircraft? So stay tuned to see what happens in that. So today's podcast was brought to you and sponsored by PM Powered. Remember to go to pmcurrent.com and subscribe to the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts. I would love to see you following me and see what's going on in my area of the world. Our podcast is posted every Monday. I would love to hear from you. Again, if you are a project manager on any one of the projects that I've talked about, please contact me. I'd love to bring you in onto the podcast and discuss the project management from your perspective, and to discuss the technologies that you bring to your project. Did I miss something that you would like to hear about? Did you disagree with something that I did or spoke about today? Again, I'd love to hear from you. Please contact me on wanda@pmpowered.com. If you have anything that you would like to chat about that we didn't discuss, please again contact me. My please go to PM Current and comment on anything, or make sure that you contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. Thank you. Look forward to hearing from you on Monday, and we'll see you the following Monday. Take care.